Greetings, everyone. You've reached S.J. Thomason with Christian-Apologists.com. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about a question that I've heard asked quite frequently from atheists. But first, let's begin to listen to Matt Dillahunty and Tracie Harris as they speak at the Atheist Experience to a caller.
Hey, this is Matthew. I called about probably 5 weeks ago.
Okay.
And you actually hung up on me once we went down the path of slavery after you asked me a question.
Yeah.
I had a question for you concerning, you had made it clear last time that even if you knew God was real, you would not worship him. You referred to him as a thug.
If the God of the Bible was real, I consider him an immoral thug who I wouldn't worship. If there is some other God, if some other God exists, I wouldn't worship that God either, because I believe that worship itself is fundamentally immoral. This idea of devout reverence to an individual, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't. In both cases, I would believe that they existed, and I may well respect the individual, provided that they can give justification for their thoughts. I just want to clear that up.
You see, to Matt Dillahunty, he's his own God. What does Jim Majors have to say?
Something.
Yes.
I've never told anybody this. Anybody.
Uh-oh.
But since 1990 is when I started. Every single prophecy about the world coming to an end, I have been the one to stop it. Every single time. Sometimes 3 or 4 a year, but I have stopped every single end time disaster until now.
We thank you for your service.
We thank you for your service.
And I predict, I prophesy here today that every single one from here until the day I die, I will stop.
I thank you for your service. Doesn't seem like quite sufficient considering what you're basically saying. Oscar, I appreciate that. Thank you for your service.
So Jim is his own God, I think, and I have to admit that's kind of funny. I'm sure he's being sarcastic, but it's still very funny. In the book of Job, we read that Job was a good man who had a strong reputation for his wisdom and righteousness. He had many possessions and a large family and had been very blessed. Some might say he had it easy, and because he had few challenges, acting in righteous ways was not difficult. Satan questioned whether Job would remain faithful to the Lord if he lost all he owned and loved. Would Job walk away from the Lord, as so many do today when significantly challenged? Would he turn from the Lord when tested? People often do. The Lord took everything away from Job, and his family members perished. Job's health also diminished, and he was covered in painful sores. People who knew him wondered why he was being punished. Some turned away from him and mocked him. He questioned the Lord in conversations with his friends, claiming to be morally pure, just, and righteous. Yet his friends scolded him, reminding him that no mortal is pure. All fall short of the glory of God. After several contentious interactions with Job, his friends stopped answering him, quote, because he was righteous in his own eyes, Job 32:1. Job was angry with them. The Lord also scolded Job, reminding him of his immense power, perfect justice, and creation. Eventually, Job came around and forgave his friends, and the Lord blessed him with more abundance than before. We can't earn salvation. We all sin and fall short of the glory of the Lord. God has granted us salvation through the sacrifice of his one and only Son. We are asked to have faith in him. The book of Job mirrors one of the lessons in the parable of the prodigal son, which is in Luke 15:11-32. In that parable, one son took his inheritance and fled from his family, only to squander it. He lost everything and ended up filling his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating. He repented and returned to his father, who joyously accepted him and rewarded him with a feast. His older son reacted in a manner that reflected his own self-righteous ways. And I quote, "The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him.' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours.' But he had to celebrate we had to celebrate and be glad because the brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. End quote. Self-righteousness is a reflection of the deadliest of sins, pride. God detests the haughty and elevates the humble. This is a lesson from both the Old and New Testament. In the New Testament, Jesus often called out the Pharisees for their prideful and self-righteous ways, which they thought would earn them a home in heaven. In the Old Testament, King Solomon shared this verse in Proverbs 6:16-19. There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush into evil, a false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community. Unfortunately, the world is littered with people who do what the Lord considers detestable. The world is filled with evil. People sometimes question God's wisdom and sovereignty when they witness suffering in the world, wondering why God would permit human suffering. Anyone who has witnessed human poverty, pediatric cancer, or the deaths and injuries resulting from catastrophic weather events has likely had these questions in his or her mind. Why would God allow suffering? The intention of this video is to offer empirical support for a global study for one of the answers. Suffering builds and improves human character. Just as God strengthened Job's character, God strengthened our character when he challenges us. Jordan Peterson in 2017 has noted that suffering is a universal human experience. We all suffer in some way and at some point in our lives. Even Jesus suffered when he was betrayed, beaten, and crucified in payment for the sins of the world, and he overcame death to give us eternal life. He also guaranteed that we would suffer too, but he offered us a lifeline when we do. In John 16:33, he said, I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. In Matthew 11:29, he says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. The landmark Globe study of 17,300 managers from over 900 companies around the globe was conducted over a 10-year period, culminating in a significant publication in 2004 with the lead author, Robert House. In the study, Robert House and other global scholars distinguished societal practices, or as-is values, from societal values, or should be, on a variety of values and leadership characteristics. One of the values the authors identified is called humane orientation. This value corresponds to benevolence and universalism and is defined as the degree to which an organization or society encourages and rewards individuals for being fair, altruistic, friendly, generous, caring, and kind to others. In all 61 societies surveyed, scores on the humane orientation indicated that societal practices were lower than societal values. In other words, people believed that humane orientation practices in their societies were lower than what they would consider to be ideal, and the differences were statistically significant. The societal average practices score was 4.09, with a range of 3.18 to 5.23, while the societal average value score was 5.42, with a range of 4.49 to 6.09. Though we feel we ought to be humane, oftentimes we are not in practice. Perhaps for this reason, the Globe study authors thought it wise to separate practices from values in their study. Where are the highest values of humane orientation practices? This question relates to the characteristics of the countries that score the highest in humane orientation practices. Are the countries with the highest practices the wealthiest or the most modern? Are they the ones with the least amount of suffering? Interestingly, the Globe authors found the band in which societal humane orientation practices is the greatest contains 6 countries, and I'll rank these in order from highest to lowest. Again, these are the highest humane orientation practices: Zambia, Philippines, Ireland, Malaysia, Thailand, and Egypt. The band in which the practices were the lowest contains, in order, again from lowest to highest, Germany West Germany, Spain, Greece, Hungary, France, Germany East, Singapore, South Africa, Switzerland, Poland, and Italy. When the biases were present in this, the authors corrected the biases. I will give you a list of a few interesting things that were correlated with societal orientation practices, humane orientation practices, and modernization measures. we see that all of these are statistically significant. The percentage of inhabitants living in modern urban settings is negatively correlated. Life expectancy is negatively correlated. Human Development Index is negatively correlated. Infant mortality rate is positively correlated. Maternal mortality rate is positively correlated. Total population with access to safe water is negatively correlated. And gross national product per capita is negatively correlated. In other words, places with the worst conditions have the highest humane practices. These results indicate that people living in the most hostile conditions, where suffering is most likely to be prevalent and pervasive, have the highest levels. The authors state, humane orientation at the societal level seems to increase under more difficult physical, economic, and climatic conditions. Help and generosity among members of society become the necessary norms for life survival and well-being. As a result of social solidarity, the human condition, in the form of psychological and physical health, improves in highly humane-oriented societies. This brings us back to our original question. Why does God allow suffering in the world? Well, He's shaping our spirits and moral character. He wants us to be selfless and others-focused. He has made this world this way for good reason. Here's an instructive quote from C.S. Lewis, which he quoted from George MacDonald in his book Mere Christianity. Imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, perhaps, you can understand what He is doing. He is getting the drains right and stopping the leaks in the roof and so on. You knew that those jobs needed doing, and so you are not surprised. But presently, He starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably and does not seem to make any sense. What on earth is He up to? The explanation is that He is building quite a different house from the one you thought of, throwing a new wing here, putting on an extra floor there, running up towers, making courtyards. You thought you were being made into a decent little cottage, but He is building a palace. He intends to come live in it Himself. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you'll like and subscribe and tell your friends, and certainly come again. Goodbye.